Hello viewer, welcome to Reflections with me, Muhammad Abubakar. We try in the program to feature as guests those outstanding Nigerians that have contributed immensely to the development of this great nation. We have today as guest, he is described by many as a doyen of vocational and technical education. To be precise, he is a one-time registrar and the chief executive National Technical Examination Board and a one-time executive officer in the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission. He is also the pioneer head of Department Technical and Vocational Education, Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria. And I read in his CV that he rejected an appointment with rather the one-time Nigeria's President Goodluck Jonathan wanted to give him. In the course of the program, we shall hear more on that from the guest. Join me to welcome Professor Olu Aina, OFR, who recently turned 80. Sir? Let me begin by congratulating you for reaching such a milestone in your life.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Sir, it is the tradition of the program to allow the guest to share with the public the little he can remember about his humble beginning in life. We are all ears.
Well, I know I started school a bit late. I was born in 1939. But I didn't start school until 1946 in St. Nicholas Catholic Primary School, Otan-Ayegbaju in Osun State. Went through, and in 1955, the Awolowo government introduced secondary modern school, which I think was a bridge between secondary and primary. I was a pioneer student of that school in Otan-Ayegbaju St. Thomas's Catholic Modern School, after which I went to teacher training college. I taught for 1 year after the modern school, just 1 year. I spent only 1 year in the primary school, in the modern school, when the then Catholic mission, taught me ready to teach. I was sent to a primary school in Agba, again in Osun State. Some of the pupils I taught are now big in various endeavors of life, some of them professors. And after that, I went to the provincial teachers grade 2 college in Osogbo to train as a grade 2 teacher, after which I went to the technical college in Ibadan. And that's where the story about technical education actually progressed. While I was in the primary school, I was simultaneously apprenticed to my father to learn carpentry. I wasn't doing very well when I started in the primary school, and a friend of my father convinced him to send me to Koro Ekiti, in the Ekiti state of today, to be a farmer. And then I, again, by some fortune, my mother and my sister, my eldest sister, truncated the plan to make me a farmer. I was returned to the school, primary school, and I started doing well. Maybe that was just a coincidence, I don't know. After which after the Technical College Ibadan, I took up a career in administration. I worked for an architectural firm in Ibadan, which designed the current OAU, then University of Ife. It's called Design Group. And from there on, the rest is what we have seen today.
I don't know if you can share with the viewers some of your mates in the school, Ibadan.
At the Polytechnic Ibadan, I remember some names, but not very vividly anymore. When we were in that school, the government started the integration of people from the north with those of the south. And some students were brought from the north, one Adamu, one Abubakar. I can't remember their surnames now. We were classmates at the Polytechnic in Ibadan. And the Polytechnic had a newspaper. I was the editor of the newspaper. And I remember I wrote an editorial which was very controversial, but at the end of the day, we resolved it. I think at that time it was when the military came in, and people like Brigadier Ogundipe and quite a number of senior southern military people were killed. And I wrote an editorial on the killings, which became controversial. But it was resolved eventually. The principal of the school at that time, one Dr. Ajayi, O.O. Ajayi, very matured man. I don't know where he is now. Maybe he's with the Lord, I don't know. He stepped in and resolved the matter, and then came Mr. O.O. Ozoro, who inherited the administration of the school from him. And I also had some other of my colleagues. Chief Tunde Ilubo is now a chief, was my classmate, and I can't remember more vividly the names of some of my colleagues, but some of them are still very much around.
I read in your CV that virtually all your tertiary education certificates were obtained abroad, to be precise, in the US. Were there no universities that time back home here for you to pursue that education?
My undergraduate actually was started at the Ibadan Polytechnic. What I wanted was something vocational, which was not readily available in any of the universities in the country. But prior to that, when I was a student at the Ibadan Polytechnic, I belonged to the Nigerian Voluntary Service Association, which was a student body. Actually, it was an international body which did a lot of community work for work camp projects. That was where I imbibed the culture of community development, practical work, in addition to what I inherited from my father as an apprentice carpenter. And we got involved in construction in that organization. And it was to further it that I sought admission to a university, to Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, which really fitted very well into what I wanted to do. And that's what happened.
So securing the admission was not much of a challenge to a young person like you?
No, not really. When I finished the technical college, I told you that I had a job. And the job that I had, I was with an architectural firm. But that was not what I really wanted. I wanted something that had to do with community development. My exploits then took me to the Quakers. It's a religious organization which came to Nigeria from the United States to take part in the relief and rehabilitation post-Civil War in Nigeria. And that was quite challenging. I was posted to the then Bendel State, and I was made to head the relief and rehabilitation work in Asaba. And my first experience at using my skill and knowledge was to rebuild the Ogbogonogo market in Asaba, which had been destroyed by the Civil War. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I lived in Igbuzo, and I rebuilt quite a number of schools also.
Okay. I'm sure the viewer would like to hear from you, you know, the attraction in vocational and technical education at such a very, very early age.
I think it had to do with what I inherited from my father, as I said. I loved carpentry. I loved doing things with my hand. Even when, before I got into carpentry, in the primary school, the headmaster of the school at that time from Ikire, one Mr. Oluwande, he was engaged in fencing the school. And we were tying raffia to fence the school, and I suggested to him, why don't we nail these raffia palms instead of tying them, because animals came, ate up the fresh palm frogs, and destroyed the fence. So he wanted to test my carpentry skill and made me head of the fencing team. So I have always had something to do with my fingers.
Okay, so you earlier told the viewer that your first university education was in Michigan, the United States of America. How was life there? You are black, young, and from what we read, racism then was very, very much pronounced in the US. I don't know whether you had, or rather you have an experience to share with the viewer.
Well, I was lucky. I wasn't really discriminated against, but I had an episode which I will share as I move on. One of the things that was exciting for me was there was a lot of evangelization going on at that time, particularly trying to interest black people, foreigners, into Christian religion. And our group was introduced to religious activities in the Baptist community.
When you say your group?
When I said my group, we had the African Students Union.
Made up of
foreign students from African nations, at that time in Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo. And I was the president of that group. One day, they came to take us to church. And as we were coming back from the church, they were taking us back to the hostel on the campus. And we passed through a building, and a black man who drove the car, who drove us, pointed to a house. He said, "That's the house I inherited from my grandmother." And we took interest. We stopped, looked at it. The house was dilapidated. And I asked, why didn't you rehabilitate this house? He said, oh, the house, he doesn't have the money to rehabilitate it. He said the builders asked him for much more than they can afford. And we stopped, looked at it, and I made comments which suggested to him that I had knowledge of, construction. And then the discussion went on, and I eventually got a contract to rehabilitate the house. I remember vividly, I saved $18,000 from that job, which was enough for the rest of my education to complete my undergraduate degree in the US at that time. I gave him a list of what I needed. I bought tools, hand tools, hired some labor to join me, particularly in lifting the wood. And it was very exciting. The man was so fascinated with the work. It took me 3 weeks to do it. And that when we finished, he paid me all that I was due for. He also gave me a car in addition. But I never had time.
Probably your first car in life.
Yeah, that's what. No. I had an old car before I left home, actually, in Nigeria. Before I left, when I was working for the Quakers, but it was an official car. But on a personal basis, yes, that must have been my first personal car. And I said I will return to one episode which attests to the issue of racism. I went to my department one Saturday morning to do some work, and when I was leaving, I had a typewriter, and I carried the typewriter and put it on the bonnet of my car. And I don't know what I was doing. Maybe I was taking a walk. When I finished, I put the typewriter in my car. I did not realize that some camera or policemen had caught the activity. As soon as I moved the car, my car was surrounded by armed policemen, and I was scared. But after I calmed down, they said they were interested in the contents of the boot of my car. I said, what about it? They thought I had stolen the typewriter. And that was the first time I felt, oh God, why gun? If indeed I stole a typewriter.
They pointed a gun at you.
They pointed a gun at me. And it was not just one. It was simultaneously pointed by about 6 of them. And
you became terrified.
I was terrified. And I thought if they wanted to kill me, that would be an overkill. Anyway, we resolved it. Apparently, the president of that university, is the equivalent of vice chancellor, had been a lecturer at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, before. And we had met him, we Nigerian students. So when they took me to the police station and asked if I had anybody to stand in for me, I mentioned the name of the vice chancellor. They were shocked because it was the campus police. They were shocked, and they called him. Yeah, he said he knew me, and it was just a stone throw from the campus police station. He himself personally and his wife came over, and I explained what happened, and it was resolved. But I was really terrified.
So that did not discourage your stay in the US?
No, it didn't discourage it. But that was the only episode I can say was very close to racism. Because I was wondering, and I still wonder today, whether such would have happened if I was a white boy.
Okay. So you were in the US for how many years?
I was in the US for 5 years, during which I completed my undergraduate, my master's, and my PhD. I must say I was very lucky. I had a very successful tenure. I did well in all my, I got, at the undergraduate level, I graduated with a 4.86 out of a maximum of 5 grade point average. And in my master's degree, I had all A's, so also while in the coursework of my PhD.
Okay. How old were you then?
Oh boy. I think I was just a little, by the time I finished, I was just a little about 30.
30, the master's degree.
Yes, with a PhD.
30, the master's degree.
Yes.
Which means, okay, the PhD.
Yes.
Wow. Share with us some of the Nigerians you pursued the course together.
There was one Adeniji, I think it was from Lagos. There was one Ogunlade from Ilesha, and there was another gentleman from, I think somewhere in Ogun State. The Nigerians in Kalamazoo at that time, in the university, they can't be in any other place anyway, we were just about 5. We became so intimate. We became very intimate, very intimate. And there was one Adetunji also. Adetunji died last year.
So when eventually we came back to Nigeria armed with a PhD degree, what did you venture into?
Well, when I finished my PhD, I got a telephone call, and the person introduced himself as Adamu Beki. Professor Adamu Beki. And he said he was calling from Ahmadu Bello University. He has heard of my academic career, and he would like me to teach at the Ahmadu Bello University. I also got a similar telephone call from one Professor Tubiele from the University of Lagos, who also wanted me to teach in Lagos. Shortly before I left Nigeria, I got married. And my wife actually grew up in the north, and she spoke Hausa very fluently. I was fascinated by that, and I opted for Ahmadu Bello University. That was in I think somewhere around 1976.
Who was the Vice Chancellor then, Ahmadu Bello University?
It was, I think it was this medical doctor, Professor Ishaya Audu. Professor Ishaya Audu.
He was the Vice Chancellor?
Yeah, he was the Vice Chancellor.
So you came back to Nigeria, took up lecturing job with...
My assignment was given to me the very day I arrived. I arrived from Kano Airport very early in the morning on British Caledonia, and I was picked up, and I went straight, arrived Zaria about 8 o'clock in the morning. They showed me the guest house that I would stay, and by 10 o'clock, I was in the office of the Dean, Adamu Beki, who gave me the assignment that my mandate was to set up a department of vocational and technical education. And he said, you have no tools. The tool is in your head. Go and make the best out of it. And I responded to the challenge, became the pioneer head of that department, and started the process of recruiting, assembling my needs, and I had a great time. I really had a great time in Zaria.
It will not be out of place for me to say that you should speak the little Hausa you can.
Kadan, I must say that that's one thing I missed. At that time, I had the choice of facing my academic career or socializing. I really wasn't an introvert, but I was so busy with what I wanted to do that I didn't have very much time to socialize. I didn't belong to even the staff club. I didn't belong to ASU, but I allowed the checkoff of my payment towards those organizations. So people didn't, because I was paying my dues, I was performing my responsibilities, people didn't know that I was just an introvert as far as that socializing is concerned. So I really I regretted that I didn't speak the language. Because that's what took me there in the first instance. It was the love of the language.
Probably the culture, the people, whatever.
I didn't mix, but you also know that the university was completely away from society. And Ahmadu Bello University had become very cosmopolitan. People from all over the world were there, and there is so much to know, there's so much to learn from the cultures and way of life of other people, of other nationalities. So it was difficult for me to concentrate on one. And in my department, for example, after we settled down, after the 26, out of the 26 of us who are lecturers in the department, I think it was only Mrs. Yarosin who spoke Hausa.
How many of your children could speak the language?
My children at that time were babies. The younger ones, the youngest two, one was born in the US. The second one was, the eldest was born in the US. Okay. Yes. The eldest, I mean, the one that followed was actually born in Zaria, in Wusasa. And by the time she moved out of Zaria, she was still a baby. I think she was just about 3 or 4 years. So they didn't speak Hausa either. They didn't speak Hausa.
Viewer, if you are just joining us, the program is Reflections, and we have today as guest one-time Registrar Chief Executive, NAPTEP, Professor Olu Aina. Sir, before the break, you were telling us about your sojourn at Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria. Now, let's talk about education. Sir, you will agree with me that education presently in Nigeria has a lot of challenges. I don't know, why do you think at this material time education is still continuing to be challenged?
Yes, there is quite a bit of challenge. I think there is a big gap between education for the sake of it and education for what we need it for. The country has not properly aligned national planning with education, with producing the manpower. It doesn't even look to me as if we know what we want as a people, as if we know what we want to use education for. For most people, education is going to school, which is a marked departure from what education is needed for. Education is too much associated with schooling in this country. And as long as your children or your child is going to school, you think he is getting education. And unfortunately, I see education as an instrument for development. If indeed it is an instrument for a very powerful one for that matter, yeah, and if that is true, then we need to know the role the child who is being educated is going to play in that development. And education should therefore prepare him. But unfortunately, that is not the case, and that remains a challenge. That gap between what education is needed for and the reason we receive it. About the time I returned to Nigeria in the mid-70s, Nigeria was writing the first national policy on education. And it was a very beautiful document. It has subsequently been revised over and over. Very beautiful document, but the implementation had been very poor. The document is there, but implementation is the one that is creating the challenge that you referred to. For example, when we introduced the 6334 education system, which is supposed to be 6 years of primary, 3 years of junior secondary, 3 years of senior secondary, and 4 years of university. The second tier, which is the 3 years following primary, is supposed to give every child a vocational skill before proceeding to senior secondary. The planners of the authors of the policy then decided we need to buy the tools with which to teach the skills. And we ordered the tools that we thought we were going to need. Later in life, I got into the ministry, and I realized that they had spent a whopping £96 million to buy the equipment for the first 3 tiers of junior secondary. It was only after the equipment arrived that everybody started asking himself, where are the workshops? Where is the electricity to power the tools? Where are the teachers to teach the skills? And that sent everybody into chaos. And then, okay, let us set aside the tools. Let's keep the tools while we hurry to build the workshops and the classrooms, and while we worry to train the teachers. Don't forget also that the vocational skills was badly hit in this inadequate planning. Badly hit because we had discarded, we were not doing very well in the skills acquisition generally. And if we didn't do well in skill acquisition, the city and guilds were no longer being offered as much as they should. Then where are we going to get the bodies to train as teachers of these skills? So we just had to set aside the aspect of skill acquisition. And that is still haunting us till today. Subsequently, the national development plans that we have made, we have done for this country, maybe about 3 of them in the past, they have been bogged down by lack of hands to actually, bring about the development.
Now, sir, let's talk about your field, vocational and technical education. Where do you place vocational and technical education in the journey of a country like Nigeria?
I think if we are serious, it should be. Now, I think every child should have a skill. Every child should have a skill. The Osun State government, a few years ago, embarked on that journey. They set up a board for technical education. The board for technical education went around and thought, well, the state cannot afford to offer these skills in all the schools. They identified 9 technical colleges located in federal, 2 in each federal constituency. And I think it was 3 in each of the 3 federal constituencies. And it was very beautifully planned, very beautifully planned. Unfortunately, midway through the implementation of that plan, there was a change of government. Onilola was the governor who started it. Onilola lost to Aregbesola in the tribunal that followed their election. It was not, I think Aregbesola decided that he would do that later or something. He told me that later that it was not properly advised, and so he didn't pursue it, and that was set aside. Up to today, that setting aside, the state is still trying to recover from it. If the state had gone through with that, Osun State will have become the hub for the production of technicians in this country.
Now, sir, this is for the education of the viewer. The NAPTEP, WAEC, and the other one, which is NECO. Yes. I don't know the relationship between the 3 and the mode of operation.
Okay. WAEC and NECO are more related in that they certify secondary school leavers. When NECO came on board, WAEC had been there since the colonial days. When NECO was about to come on board, it received mixed feelings in this country because a lot of people felt NECO will be duplicating WAEC job. But I was one of the people in the forefront of the establishment of an alternative to WAEC, i.e. NECO. Because for a country as large as Nigeria, even 10 examination boards were not going to be too many. The UK, which was a fraction of Nigeria's population as at that time, I believe had about 6 examination bodies. Each of them, we approach the job from different angles. For the UK, it has helped them. Now, as for NAPTEB, it was during the tenure of Professor Fafunwa as Minister of Education that that NAPTEB was actually introduced. It coincided with the time when NECO was also established. And prior to that time, the country has been contemplating setting up a board for the certification of skills, as it is in virtually all countries of the world. And that was how NAPTEB came on board to certify skills. But these are all examinations at equivalent of secondary school level.
Sir, I read in your CV that you are the pioneer, registrar and chief executive of national, or rather of NAPTEB. I am sure the viewer would like to hear from you how such an appointment happened.
Where Professor Fafunwa came to Kaduna for the meeting of the National Council on Education, and he sent for me. I was then in ABU. He sent for me and the Vice Chancellor, Professor Daniel Saro, who was the VC at that time, sent for both of us. And he introduced the topic and wanted to set up this board. It has been approved by the Federal Executive Council. And Fafunwa asked me whether I was favorably disposed. I said yes. And when we were talking about the commencement of the work, I told him I had some PhD students I was supervising and I would need some time to complete. He asked how much time. I said I needed about 6 to 9 months. It was on a Friday. He said, no, this job that I have for you, you are starting it on Monday.
Wow.
Yeah. I started it on Monday at the NTA in Kaduna. I was an associate professor. Yes, but my professorship was already in the works. And actually, I took more than the few days he gave me. And at the last Senate meeting that I attended, my professorship was announced.
Okay. So let's hear some of the, you said you pioneered the NAPTEB. What did you put in place to ensure that the organization survived?
Well, we conducted a study to find out what is it that make people run away from vocational and technical education. And one of the things we found was that a lot of people felt vocational technical education is for the people that are not so endowed. So why must you send your child to what looks like a dead end? That's one. Secondly, we found that upward mobility for holders of technical vocational certificates was difficult, just as it was when I was looking for a place to advance my studies much earlier on. The problems that were there at that time were still there. And we then said, okay, what we need to do is to make it attractive. So we went on a tour of all the states and we persuaded all the governors to set up boards for vocational and technical education in their states. It was a military era, so it was not too difficult to make things happen. You know, they do their things with immediate effect, automatic alacrity. So now, we also looked at the curricula which we inherited from the City and Guilds and WAEC, and we decided that this curricula need to be greatly modified to include what we called the enabling knowledge. For if we are going to do mechanics, for example, or we are going to do woodwork, we decided first and foremost, everybody needs some mathematics. So we are going to introduce mathematics as a compulsory subject for everybody that wants to do technical education. Now, depending on what your career is going to be in the future, you have to pick up either physics or chemistry. If you want to do food science, for example, you have to do chemistry. If you want to do engineering drawing, or you want to do carpentry, or auto mechanics, you have to do physics. So we introduced the enabling subjects. We also decided that in order for you to do well, you have to be able to relate to people, communicate. So we also introduced social studies. So for anybody that wants to do technical education, you have to have the enabling subjects, mathematics, social studies, in addition to your core technical area, which must be about 60% of the total knowledge that you need to function as a technician. And that was one thing we introduced. Also at that time, there was a prevalence of examination malpractice. We then said, no, this must not, there should be no need for examination malpractice if what you want to test is whether or not the person knows whether or not he's a good mechanic. So we said, no, our examinations will no longer be a secret thing. So for the practical, we send the questions to the schools 3 weeks ahead of the exam. And we tell the teachers to expose the questions to the students. But what the students have to do, they take the questions home. In order to prepare for it, for the question, they must buy the things they need to perform the skill. But they are going to bring these things to the school on the day of the examination and construct whatever they say they want to construct in the presence of examiners. So examination malpractice was no longer, we didn't tell them we were trying to use it to eliminate examination malpractice, but there was no need because we have already done the malpractice ourselves. So those were a few of the things we introduced which hitherto were not there.
Now, sir, talking about teachers' colleges that were abolished in the early 90s, I would like you to speak from your position as an educationist, the implication of abolition teacher training colleges as it happened in the early 90s in Nigeria.
Well, it ought not to have been. I must say that as a chief executive of a federal parastatal in the education sector, I was part of that decision. And it was also part of the national policy on education. What the formulators of the policy wanted was to raise the standard of education by saying, in order for you to be able to teach, you have to have a better qualification, even though at primary level, you have to have a better qualification than grade 2. So you have to have a minimum of NCE. So, and then it was run for like 10 years. And the grade 2 was gradually and naturally phased out as at that time. I myself have been a product of teachers grade 3, teachers grade 2. And, but unfortunately, because the implementation of the national policy on education itself was poor, as I had earlier on alluded to, the teachers who were now training at NCE level did not fit perfectly into the primary school. So the nation asked them to go and teach at at a level higher than primary. Therefore, there was another gap that was created there. There was, a lacuna in the sense that the teachers who are supposed to teach at the GSS level were not being trained to teach at GSS level. And here we are, the grade 2 teachers who are teaching at primary school had been phased out. So this is the problem. I think we should retain what we have now, but improve on the NCE education.
Okay, sir, I want you to educate the viewer on the functions of these two very, very important agencies in the fight against corruption, which is ICPC and EFCC. The public is, mistaking their functions when it comes to operation. I don't know what you have to say in respect of that.
Well, the main function of ICPC is to prevent stealing of money that belongs to the government. Whereas the main function of EFCC is to prevent the economy from being ruined by those who want to soil their hands. So you can say the two of them are trying to prevent thieves, but different types of thieves and different types of stealing. But stealing is stealing. So if ICPC sees anybody stealing any money that can destroy the economy, ICPC can intervene. Similarly, EFCC. But fundamentally and in a very simplistic way, that is the difference.
Sir, I don't know, you are no doubt an elder statesman, meaning that you have an advice to give to the upcoming generation so that they make Nigeria a better place and also to continue from where people like you are going to stop. Sir, what advice do you have to give to the upcoming generation to make Nigeria a better place?
I think there is much to do, but for me, what needs to be done is very easy. I think everybody should chart a course for himself and put himself to the service of humanity, to the service of this nation, and to the service of themselves. And that is not asking too much. And remain focused in whatever you have decided to do. And I think things will work well. And if I may also ask you, you raised the question of rejecting a job which was given to me by the federal government. Actually, it's not rejecting as such, because they only raised that issue also when it's sent for me over the appointment into the board of ICPC. What actually happened was that prior to that time, somebody called me and said they were considering me for a position. And I asked what the position was, and I realized that the position required an economist. And I said, but sorry, I am not an economist. I don't remember the job now. And I think that's what a lot of people referred to as rejecting an offer. And that's why the later on he also said, I learned that you are arrogant, because you have rejected government's offer. I said, no.
But the simple reason for rejecting you gave was that?
I didn't have the competence for the job. Okay. I didn't have the competence for the job, and I know I'm not arrogant. I like to contribute my quota to the development of the country, and I know I like to render service to the nation. And so the question of rejecting for the sake of rejecting cannot arise.
Sir, lastly, Nigeria is presently challenged in so many fronts, from corruption, insecurity, to mention but a few. should the present generation begin to have feeling of despair because of the enormous challenges?
Oh, definitely there is hope for Nigeria, and there must be hope. But what I would like to see, if you do some sociological profiling of those who are causing trouble for this country in the area of insecurity, restiveness, you will see that these are young people. And I like to, although I do not have any empirical evidence to support this, but I would like to think that if these young people have something productive that they can do, it stands to reason that they would rather earn their living using their hands, using their minds. So I think we as a nation, we owe these young people a living. And one living we can give them is to give them skills with which to get employed. And that's where education again comes in. But as for hope for this country, definitely there is hope. I don't feel this country is going to perish.
Okay. So viewers, on that note, we have come to the end of the program this week. On behalf of the guest, Professor Olu Aina, I remain yours, Muhammad Abubakar, saying, be with us sometime next week for another episode. Sir, thank you very much for finding time to be with us. We're grateful. Thank you.